Are we good now? So Commissioner, you might want to start over again.
Yes, so I will call the meeting to order, if everyone can hear me now, at 9:03 a.m. And we will start with a round of introductions, first in the room and then online. I am Nancy Wise, Commissioner and Chair.
Pat Malone, Commissioner and Vice Chair.
Zan Oshore, Commissioner.
Joe Kirby, County Administrator.
Tom McGuire, Sustainability Program.
Pamela Bibble, Admin Assistant.
Paul Walsinger, Facilities Manager.
Adam Lawrence, Director of IT.
Laura Kwiatkowski, Meeting Recorder.
Corey Rubin, Public Information.
All right, and we will move to online.
Jeff Van Arsdale, Benton County Sheriff.
Gary Stockout, Public Works.
All right, is there anyone else online that would like to introduce themselves?
This is Beth Jameson with Brightworks Sustainability.
All right, with that, we can move on to announcements. Are there any announcements?
Commissioners, just to make sure you're aware, I'll be leaving about 11 o'clock. And so I'll miss a couple of the items, but we'll circle back with Commissioner Wise and Laura later today in case there's any action items for me. And also as it relates to my county administrator update, as you're aware, I'll be going on vacation starting on Thursday. So you'll be getting an email from me maybe some point between today and tomorrow. Who's going to be covering for county administrator, contact information, and I'll also provide some of the brief updates I have for you on the topics tonight.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will review and approve the agenda. I have just one change to the agenda. I'm going to change the second 3.6 to 3.6.5. How about that? All right, any other changes to the agenda?
No.
All right, I will consider that approved. Moving on to discussion topics. First up, 3.1, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design LEED Gold Certification of Calapooya Building. And we have with us Paul Walsinger, our Facilities Manager, Beth Jameson, the Senior Project Manager of Brightworks. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. I wanted to sort of start the conversation that we're having here today with a short history lesson. We began purchasing this building early 2019. We made it through the purchase process coming into the end of 2019. And as we started the design process, we asked ourselves this fundamental question. We want to get a LEED certification for the building. How do you do that, right? You know, exactly how do you go about getting this mysterious LEED certification? So I went back and I dug through all of my emails, and it was 2/26 of 2020 when I received an email from Robert Isu from a DLR group saying, hey, you need to reach out to Brightworks Sustainability. That's who we use to run us through this process. 6/29 of 2020, we contracted with Brightworks for an assessment for LEED, Fitwell, and sort of a laundry list of other certifications that we may have been capable of achieving at the time. After those were kind of ran through, we settled on a LEED certification and a Fitwell certification. And we were going to do everything humanly possible to get to a LEED Silver certification, but we would take just the LEED certification if that's what it turned out to be. We ended up contracting with them on 3/18 of 2021 as our LEED consultant and hit the ground running. And I have personally learned just a landslide of information of what it means to get a LEED certification and to pick up these certifications and the things that are involved in these certifications. And if it wasn't for the amazing tutoring and help and guidance and spankings that we received from Brightworks, I think we would have fallen short of our goal. But instead of that, we hit our stretch goal. Right now, I'm going to let Beth go through the score sheets and sort of explain the details of it. But we're required 60 points to receive a LEED Gold certification. Right now, we're forecasted at 65 points, so that gives us sort of a 5-point buffer zone going to lead gold. And we're really only one component away from finalizing, which is the final commissioning of the building, which is going to happen here in the next couple of weeks. So, but with that, I'll turn it over to Beth, and you know, she's the wise one when it comes to this LEED certification. It is very complicated.
Great, thanks, Paul. You stole some of my talking points.
Sorry.
I'm just kidding. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Do you guys have screen share? I do have a slideshow, although it's not.
Give me 1 minute, Deb, and I'll get you set up.
Sorry, I sent you a note very last minute.
Okay, Beth, do you have a share screen option at the bottom of your
I
toolbar?
do.
Go ahead.
All right. Does everybody have eyes on that?
Yes.
Great. Thank you again, Paul, for the awesome introduction. As Paul noted, I'm with Brightworks Sustainability, so just a little overview of who we are, and thank you to DLR for bringing us in on this project. We've also worked with them on their own office space here in Portland, so good relationship with that team. So a big part of our work is working on sustainable and healthy buildings, so supporting teams like yours and certifications. We also have some other services around materials and energy, and supporting organizations that are, you know, working on larger like reporting frameworks. But like Paul said, I think, you know, where we started, and I wasn't in the very first meeting, but Josh Hatch, who's the principal at our company, actually presented to you guys, I think the summer of 2020. So you know, we started by looking at your climate action plan and looking to see like, what is Benton County trying to achieve, and how can we make sure that the design and construction of this space is aligned with the goals of the county. So I'm sure you're all aware that, you know, you have a greenhouse gas emissions goal, which is in line with the state of Oregon's climate goals to drastically reduce our emissions levels. So it was fun taking a look back at this and seeing just how many of the action items we were able to tick off by going through this LEED and Fitwel process. So you can see, you know, we've obviously met the LEED standards. I'm not going to walk through all of these, but just visually, it was great to see. You know, we visited this in the beginning, and as it goes, we worked on the project and kind of hadn't looked at it for a while. And I was like, wow, we really met a lot of the marks that we were targeting. So, and just wanted to note that obviously sustainable buildings play a huge part in not only, you know, the Benton County goals, but globally, the buildings contributions to our greenhouse gas emissions is 40% roughly. So starting with our buildings is a great way to start making an impact and a dent on those carbon reduction goals. As Paul noted, we, you know, went through some different strategies and options and landed on some certifications. I think that your team is probably aware, as you are making note that you want projects to achieve LEED certification, that a certification really does add sort of that extra level of scrutiny and rigor, so that you know at the end of the day what was achieved, and you can stand behind those statements, and you have clear documentation for exactly what was done. So that's sort of why we went down this pathway. But this is kind of what Paul was going through back in summer of 2020. We started on the sustainability assessment, and thank you. I know both Sean and Sarah from your public health department were engaged in those early conversations as we were looking through like all the different, potential certifications that could be considered. And as Paul noted, we landed on both LEED and Fitwel. And so I wanted to give some high level kudos on some of the achievements we've got there. And obviously, we had a global pandemic hit in the middle of all of this. So I don't know how Paul has managed all of the on-site activities as well as he has, but there were some delays and there are some hiccups, but here we are looking at a LEED Gold building. So I'm really excited that We're wrapping up, and like Paul noted, we have commissioning to wrap up on the lead side, and Fitwel, we have some operational pieces, but hopefully by, late 2022, the final certifications for both will be in place. So just to give you some lead highlights, I think most of you are probably somewhat familiar with the rating system, but it's a points-based rating system, and it has 4 different levels of achievement. The project at 4500 Research Way is tracking 65 points, so very nicely sitting in that gold category. I know we distributed the scorecards ahead of the meeting, so I think you all may have a copy of this. Not that we need to go into detail of all the different credits, but you can see the far left column there showing yes targeted points, and then we have columns for maybe yes, maybe no. So basically during design and construction, we were continuously vetting this with the project team to see what made sense, where we could push, what opportunities we had. So a couple of big highlights to share. One of the categories for water, a hugely important category. We achieved a 40% savings annually. So you can see the baseline on the left there is using close to 1,800 gallons a year, whereas our project landed right around 1,000. So this is for like toilet flushing and hand washing. So this was basically by making sure we installed super low efficient plumbing fixtures that also met WaterSense standards. So that means that they've been tested to make sure that they still perform, but use far less water. So that was a great achievement there. We really saw some amazing gains on the energy side. We had opportunity midway through the project to actually upgrade the HVAC systems, which was a huge help. And also we have the PV array on the roof. So you can see this is the summary of our lead model, and there's a lot of different metrics here, but the EUI is essentially the energy use index. So it takes the total energy use divided by the square footage. So you can see, the baseline building would have been a 45 EUI, and we landed at a 37 EUI. So that's a great achievement. In terms of how that shakes out for LEED, it's a 30% reduction, which earned us all 25 of the energy points. So that was when we were like, I think we've got a gold project on our hands here. So that was really exciting. Just to highlight some of the measures that went into that. We had reduced lighting demand, as I noted, the HVAC system, and then of course the rooftop solar providing really 30% of the building's energy usage. This is kind of a detailed slide on embodied carbon, and I know we are short on time, so I'm not going to go into too much depth, but what we were just talking about is like operational carbon. So what is it going to take to operate the building once you have people in it, as you do now? Embodied carbon is really taking a step back and acknowledging all the energy that goes into making products before they even show up on site. So products have a huge life cycle and a huge impact on the environment before they get to our project site, from extraction and transportation and manufacturing. So now there's a really big push on not just considering our operational energy, but also considering the embodied energy when we build buildings. So this again is showing on the right-hand side of the graph is like the carbon from buildings. And you can see the operational portion of the chart is 28%, but then the embodied carbon piece is over 20%. So that's a huge chunk of the pie that we had kind of been missing. So I just wanted to highlight it for this project because it's such an excellent example. Reuse is really the earliest and most dramatic way that we can cut embodied carbon. These materials already exist, they're already there. So by virtue of, both reusing the shell, sorry, this is not a picture of your project. I didn't have time to get that on there, but reusing the building shell, reusing any of the interior materials where we could. And then another great thing that Paul coordinated with Hyphen was basically refurbishing and reusing furniture systems. So by cost, over 40% of the project was refurbished and reused furniture, which again, from a sustainability standpoint, is a huge story. So having the building reused and having reused components in the building are just great achievements of the project. We also focused heavily on meeting strict emissions and VOC criteria so that we could be confident that when you have your staff in there and you have the public in there, that we don't have materials that are off-gassing or, you know, creating any problems for people in the space. So the second certification that we pursued is Fitwel. So on the right, you can see this is showing the LEED areas of focus, and climate change is really the big driver for LEED, which is why you can see that there's such an emphasis on the energy performance. But we knew that we also wanted to think about human health in here. So while human health is a portion of LEED, it's really not a driver, like the main driver. So we looked at a Fitwel certification to pair up with the LEED certification so that we were hitting not only the carbon and energy and environmental goals, but also looking at health and wellness. So Fitwel is the certification that we landed on. Again, we looked at this with, you know, a group of folks, and we also considered WELL, which is another certification out there, but Fitwel is really focused on public health, and it came out of the GSA. So I think it was a great alignment for Benton County. We are tracking, so as opposed to the silver or gold metrics, it's 1 star, 2 star, 3 star. For this project, we're right at the 1 star level, which honestly is great. We didn't know we were going to be able to hit Fitwel at all. So we're really proud to be at this point. We are still vetting some of the policy items, and there's a possibility we'd get up to the 2nd star, but having the Fitwel certification was the primary goal. So that was the other scorecard that we shared that you may have in your hands. So you can see there are still some points under evaluation here. I think some of the highlights from this project that would be good to share is, you know, again, Fitwel is very focused on public health, human health, so increasing activity levels and healthy eating are big focuses. So having, you know, the central staircase being more prominent than the elevators, just focusing on like simple actions that can make a big impact in the long run. We also have bike parking, we have fitness amenity, there's opportunities for staff to go outside and walk and do things locally. We also focused on, you know, making sure staff had somewhere to go and eat and not be at their desk while they're having lunch. There's a wellness room that can be used if, you know, you have a headache and you need to have some quiet time, or nursing mothers can use for pumping. And then another nourishment category, since we aren't really providing food on the at the site, we have some conversations underway with Paul about vending machines and seeing if we can't get those to include some healthy options as well. But the provision of water is a big thing, you know, getting people accustomed to drinking plain water versus sugary drinks. So making sure we have water dispensers that are, you know, throughout the space. And I think that's it for my highlights, but happy to answer any questions. And I guess just generally, we're super pleased to have been involved in the project and to see it go from where we started to where we got with the LEED Gold certification and a Fitwel certification on the way.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Any comments or questions?
I'd just like to take a brief second to throw out the honorable mentions for the people who worked extraordinarily hard to make this happen. Ryan Swinson with Girding Builders tracked every single piece of waste that left this building, where it went, how much it weighed, put it in every single component that we used in this building, from the drywall to the switches to everything, were loaded into a website for Brightworks to review, again, for those VOCs and off-gassing things. And so he put an enormous amount of personal time and effort and diligence into making sure that we were able to collect, document the information that we needed to get to these points. Next is the facilities team, who put in just a little over 1,000 man hours alone, just in disassembling, cataloging, categorizing, stacking, and shipping off furniture pieces for the reuse process to send and be refurbished. They have well over 1,000 man hours just in that disassembly process. And anybody who got to go over and see that in progress would realize that the monumental, we disassembled over 240 workstations just on that half of the building to put into the refurbishment. So they put a tremendous amount of hours into that. The efforts that were put in by Brightworks Sustainability and their staff through this whole thing. We've had, you know, monthly and bi-weekly meetings for the last 2 years, you know, and that's just in meeting to review the score sheets and go over where we are, and the tremendous amount of time that they put into that as well. And then, you know, there's a handful of other people who have, you know, contributed dramatically in order to meet this higher goal. So just wanted to give all those people a shout out.
Well, I'd also like to make sure we're recognizing both you and Gabby, because if it wasn't for the two of you, a lot of this wouldn't have happened. So I appreciate you recognizing your team, but you've been in there in the trenches for 2 years trying to make all of this work. And it's really great to see it come together, considering that we were targeting silver. It looks like we're going to achieve gold. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and well, you know, so many people. Gabby was the keeper of the information, and I thought it was appropriate that she was at this meeting today for a couple of reasons, just to see how these meetings work, and you know, for the part of the fact that you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails. I was saving every email related to this project at one point, and I gave up on that. I don't know how long ago, because it was going to crash my computer. So, but you know, and if you go back and you look through all those emails in the little over a year that Gabby's been with us, her name is on just about every single one of those. So,
Thank you, Gabby. Did you get to give me the demo?
I did help take down some of the cubes.
Nice.
But it was tough work, so.
All right, Commissioner Moore.
Yeah, really appreciate the update. I've been following this from the beginning and what the goals were, and it's really nice to get some feedback on how those goals were achieved, and great to surpass our initial targets, and this fits right in with our 2040 goals, and it's the old initial cost versus the future. And this building's going to be around a long time. It's already 25 years old. We think of it as a new building. In some ways it is, but this is part of Benton County's future, and proud that we've done whatever we can to look to the future and make those kind of decisions. May have been some higher initial costs, whether it's the HVAC or other parts, but that's the short term. The long term is having those benefits for as far as we can see. So appreciate all the efforts, and this is exciting. 2 or 3 weeks it will be fully occupied, and I remember this room from the EOC days. It's changed quite a bit. So thank you for the efforts, and you mentioned Ryan from Girding Construction. I'd be well, Corey's back there. Wake up. There's some great stories in here, and one I'd like to see is just what did happen with what we took out of the building. I remember the slides from the second floor into the dumpsters, but I really haven't heard too much about, well, sheet rock went here, and we did get good information on refurbishing, and reusing the cubicles, and that's a great part of the story. But there's some good stuff here, Corey.
Absolutely. We'll follow up on it.
Thanks.
And I have a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, not to put you on the spot, but I think we had some actual dollar savings as well, right?
Well, yeah, it's sort of hard to qualify. You know, it was almost 400, I think we were estimating pretty close to $400,000 in savings on the reuse for the furniture. So the difference between using the refurbished parts versus buying brand new parts. So we were right in the neighborhood of about $400,000 on that. And then the actual energy savings, the long-term cost of operation of this building will be significant. You know, those numbers are a little hard to qualify right now as we continue to load in the building. Plug loads increase and all of these sort of things. But we're probably, and the previous tenant was a huge energy user. They had you know, these massive servers and these massive HVAC units that were used to cool those. And so just in a reference, and then when Fiserv was still part of this building, our electric bill was about $10,000 a month.
Nice.
And now our electric bill is just over 1,000. So I'm claiming 90% savings.
Hey, you know, I
Way to
heard,
go, Paul.
Yeah,
I heard $400,000. That's a lot of money to save. Yes,
it is
that's awesome.
a lot of money to
Yeah.
save. And realistically, the money we saved on furniture then paid for the upgraded HVAC systems that we put in the building. And then the energy savings is really a return on investment for the other things we put in the building, the light harvesting system, which is, and you know, full LED light harvesting system, which uses a fraction of the energy that we were using with, you know, T8 fluorescent bulbs through the entire building. The HVAC system and the control system that were put in place for it, so that we have occupied and unoccupied room sensors, and you know, a lot of sort of fancy components that are tied onto that. All of those energy savings just end up being an ROI on those extra costs.
Very cool.
Paul, I was just gonna add, you know, obviously we didn't have time to cover everything, but I just did want to note, we do have the recycling data. So we achieved overall a 65% recycling rate. So, but we have the hard numbers on exactly what went where, if anybody's interested in those details, and Girding has them as well. And then, you know, the energy model was done to sort of help us target what measures would be useful. And it's not necessarily a proxy for actual energy use, but at least according to the energy model, the design is anticipated to operate at $15,000 less than the baseline annually. So that's another metric. But like Paul noted, you have crazy, you know, you had a tenant in there using a ton of energy. So the savings you're seeing are even, you know, beyond that. But based on the model, that's what it's anticipated to save.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to you and your entire team, including Girding Builders and Brightworks. It was a huge project. And I know that at every step along the way, we went into it with a bit of trepidation about investing the additional money, not knowing what was going to come out the other end. The energy model that Beth just referred to, for instance. So I'm hoping that this was a really good first experience with LEED, and that it will inform the green building policy for the county as we move forward, so that this isn't a one-off, but that we can take these lessons and move them into all of our future construction projects. So the only question I have is, were there any real lessons learned for you through the process?
Wow, yeah, lots of lessons learned. Because quite frankly, and I'll be honest, when we started the LEED process, we were, okay, we're gonna go get this plaque, and I saw what the initial costs were gonna be and what we were gonna be in it. And Joe knows I gave him a hard time, like, I'll make you a LEED plaque. It'll be nice with their plaque. I'll bedazzle that thing for you, right? for the
I remember that discussion.
for the price of the LEED package, but I was wrong. I couldn't have been more wrong. all I was really seeing was, sort of the upfront numbers and the cost of the county, and the cost of the citizens, but what we put in place is a long-term sustainability, a long-term sustainable project. The actual cost of operation of this building has been reduced so dramatically that we will hit return on investment for these things that we did and go past that and continue to be actually a savings for the citizens of Benton County for years and years and years and years to come. As even as technology progresses and goes forward, this building will be a part of that for a good long time, I think, before technology starts overrunning the things that we put in place here today. So it was that. We didn't do every single thing that we could do. There were some lead components that we didn't do. One of them, a massive energy savings, is we can program in half of the plug load of this building to shut off every day at 5 o'clock. Unless you apply for it to turn back on for some reason. It's a whole computerized system that allows us to do that. All I could imagine was poor Adam coming in every morning, all the UPSs are beeping and blinking, and it just wasn't feasible. It just did not work within our operations. And so there were certain things that we chose not to do because they just weren't going to work with our culture and with our operations. So that was a good learning experience as well, figuring out what those are.
Good, very good. Any other comments or questions?
Sure, I think Sean had a
Oh,
comment.
sure.
Actually, you hit most of them. Just as point of reference, I was a big league program manager for the state of Maryland back in 01 when LEED, nobody knew what LEED was at all. And just, I echo a lot of that, echo a lot of what I'm saying. The two things I want to say, which you just hit on. So fiscal sustainability is just as important, and it's odd to come full circle to hear these same conversations. So like, yes, it is an investment. You nailed the word, and it is. And too often it's upfront, all these upfront costs. It's not. It's, we're going to own this thing for 30 years. The only other thing I want to add was, and Beth, I'm sure can confirm, it's you to make that commitment early. You can't duct tape these things on at the end. I mean, this has to be first question. We're talking crisis center. We're talking all these facilities are about to be built. Paul and I were talking about policies or things to make sure that's the first question before the architect is set, all that. So just reinforcing what Paul's saying, I'm sure Beth will say the same thing. That early commitment, is just so critical. So sustainability critical. Thank you for making that so early and having that support. So
I'm grateful to have builders in the community that are so committed to it as well.
Yes, definitely. Any last comments or questions? All right, well, with that, Paul, if you really want to make a bedazzled plaque, I still have space on my wall in my office. So right out there.
I wouldn't tempt me with that.
Actually, Paul, I do have a suggestion for you, and I've been pondering this for the last month. I think our employees would be really interested in this information, and to Commissioner Malone's point, Corey, there's a role for you to play in this. But I can almost see us doing either a Joe with Joe or doing some other presentation where you and Brightworks, present for an hour, and we just open it up to employees for employees to come and hear about the building and the different features. The light harvesting thing that you talk about, I never remember what you call it, but it works. It's really amazing. So anyway, just a suggestion that we should talk about in the future. How do we arm our employees with the information about the work that we've done and why we have done?
Yeah, sure, be glad to. And as Beth alluded to, we have all the numbers. We have a mountain of data that we pulled back out of this project. So.
Very good. Well, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just tagging along with that, what I hear today in Benton County as a leader, we're trying to figure out best practices and put them into practice, not just, well, we've got a nice book on the shelf that says, well, we have goals, and so I like Joe's idea of having Joe with Joe in this building, and this is what we're doing, and to address our climate goals and keep our community and staff healthy and safe, and it's real. It's not just nice ideas. And thank you and your crew for battling through a lot of challenges. Ta-da, it's here.
Right, yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
We appreciate you coming here and telling us all about this.
Thank you, commissioners.
And David, thanks for coming along.
With that, we will move on to the Oregon Department of Transportation Fund Exchange Program changes with Gary Stockoff, our Public Works Director, who's joining us online. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you all, and welcome from the hill country of Texas. It is a little toasty here, to say the least, but I don't know how much we need to cover. I know that we talked about this a little bit at the end of the District 5 meeting, but I think Commissioner Wise, you had maybe left by then. But where we're at now with the fund exchange is it is going to happen. It's going to be removed. It very much is budgetary issues. And I think we've all kind of come to the point of any change to this is going to be a legislative one. And I think Joe can probably summarize what the plan is, but I think they're trying to get together maybe some elected officials and submit a letter, AOC, LOC, whoever, to the legislature just to kind of emphasize the impact that taking away the fund exchange will have on the smaller local agencies. And I used, for our example, the Gibson Hill project. Actually, first of all, I used being able to purchase our equipment. If we had not had that fund exchange available to us, we could not have upgraded all the equipment that we did, which was, greatly needed. And then Gibson Hill, we had made an agreement with Albany to fix Gibson Hill, bring it up to urban standards. And then, of course, the pandemic took a hit into our revenues. So we delayed it 1 year, and they were very gracious in allowing us to extend that agreement 1 year to complete it. But if it was not for the fund exchange to fill the gap, especially once all the prices started going up, we could not have finished Gibson Hill like we did. And the good news is it's paved, and we are now in the process of wrapping it up, and it will be transferred to us, to the city of Albany. So they're very imperative, those funds are. And a little bit of a follow-up, we also wanted to do a major overlay on Spring Hill Road, which if you've been out there, there's parts of that they're in rough shape. And we had planned on doing that this year, but then with the budget issues we had to delay it. But we've gone out and we're going to request the remaining funds that we have available in our fund exchange, and then we'll have Spring Hill ready to go next spring. So again, very imperative, but I'm preaching to the choir because all the local agencies, other than if you're certified, and there's just a handful of agencies that are certified, the new program, with it all being federal dollars, is going to be quite cumbersome, to say the least. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have, or if there's anything else you want me to follow up on.
Commissioners, I do have some additional information for you. As you're aware, several weeks ago, we met with the city managers, our quarterly meeting that we had with them. This was one of the topics that we discussed. Subsequent to that meeting, there was communication between Peter Trosden from the city of Albany, myself, Darren Lane, and a few others. And we decided that we would like to advance the letter. And so we did draft a letter that would be coming from the administrators and the managers. That would be going to ODOT and possibly several legislators. I took that letter and I shared it with Brian Worley at Association of Oregon Counties and asked him for his input and whether or not he thought we should take this particular action. And particular action that we were contemplating, as I mentioned, including ODOT as well as several legislators came from a workout conversation that occurred in a local gym with Representative Rayfield and Peter Trosden. So just so you know, that was kind of informed by that discussion in terms of what our strategy is going to be. in talking with Brian Worley with AOC, I think he feels like we may be a little premature. And while he supports us sending the letter if we wish to, AOC is planning on developing their own letter and then getting that out to counties for the commissioners to embrace, hopefully sign off on, and then submit. So I have to talk to my colleagues to see if they still have a desire to move forward with us signing the letter from the administrator and managers with the acknowledgement and recognition that there will be another letter that will be bringing before you, that AOC is really crafting on this particular topic. And as Gary mentioned, it really is trying to prepare legislators for this discussion for the next legislative session, because it does appear that ODOT has no intentions of changing direction.
I think that personally, it may make sense to still send the letter that you all have talked about crafting, especially if it focuses on the specifics of how it's going to affect us here. And the fact that we already do have a great level of collaboration between Lynn County and Benton County, Albany, Corvallis on these transportation issues. But even despite that, and the fact that we have a certified partner entity in Albany, it still is not enough to make a difference in terms of flexibility or funding from the loss of the fund exchange. And that I think that having that letter and with specifics in it will be very helpful to both Speaker Rayfield, Senator Kelsey Bluen, hopefully Rep. Gomberg, and our other representatives like Shelley Wilshire Davis as they move forward. And what I heard Brian Worley saying is that the most important thing is not to accuse ODOT, because this is not a problem that they're making, and that we need to treat them as a partner. But that said, we need to arm our legislators with as much information about the specific effects as we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm inclined to be supportive of 2 letters as well. Although I guess you didn't actually ask us that, so I'll leave that up to all of you. Any other comments or questions?
You kind of, Gary kind of skipped over the background that ODOT is looking for money, is that, and their future, out 2 or 3 years, future budget looks pretty bleak, and that's the reason for changing this formula. Is that accurate?
I think Gary's frozen.
Okay.
That's what Brian Worley said.
And I would second the notion of not beating up on ODOT. They're responding to the hand they've been dealt, and so it makes sense to loop in our legislative partners as much as we can, and see what other options there may be besides interrupting transportation dollars that go to local governments. So, and the other point is, I haven't heard Council of Governments mentioned in this discussion, and fortunately our lead transportation person, Nick Meltzer, is back, and make sure that that they are part of this discussion.
Great, thank you for that feedback.
Make an editorial pitch. I think we are way overdue at the federal level and at the state level for having some way to also bring in highway taxes from electric vehicles, especially with the major electric vehicle push that's going on right now across the country. And this is a problem that we've known is going to happen for a long time. It's something that Congressman DeFazio has been working on for years, but it's so dang unpopular to increase the gas tax that it's a very tough situation.
Federal gas tax has not been increased since 1994. Which is why the legislative package, the infrastructure bill, okay, if you're not going to take care of it on a regular basis, we'll come around and try to put a substantial sum of money into the transportation arena and hope that that balances things out.
Other comments or questions?
So commissioners, at this point, my intent will be to continue to move forward with my partners relative to managers and administrators and finalize that letter. Gary will be involved in reviewing that letter as well, and then we'll make sure to connect with Nick Metzler as well with the COG. And then once AFC has their letter drafted, which I think will be coming forward probably next week or so, then we'll work that through the process with the board and put that on the agenda if you're open to
Very good.
that. Thank you.
And thank you, Gary. We appreciate you taking the time today. All right, that will bring us to item 3.3. 2040 organizational goals confirmation with Sean McGuire, our sustainability coordinator.
This is a minor
Thank
updated version of what you have. Thank you, Commissioner. So just a quick recap. I've come to you before a couple of meetings to identify your priorities for the upcoming FY 23-25 budget. I've read this here to correct me when I'm wrong. Again, it's been really wonderful to stemming from the FY 21-23, the issue of COVID and all the late and everything, to really dive into what we were trying to do back in 2019, which is really get into priority-based budgeting. Correct with that. And that is the correct, if that's how we're going to move forward. As I've shared, the schedule, the priorities need to be done by this week. And then that way, from Joe's direction, having department directors identify their 3 to 5 departmental goals that are on with this and the focus areas. So what you have before you, you confirmed the priorities at the last meeting, and so I kind of across the board. The first sheet, side 1 and 2, are the more descriptors. I sent that out for your review late last week. You will see, Commissioner Rowe, you did provide comment on page 3, which is in blue, the bottom 5. I hope I captured this correctly. Which are more examples, which will probably be more useful in the budget document. So I assume this is going to be, I plan for this to be iterative. Like, I don't know, did you see other things in responsible governance? And we'll just kind of build that library, for lack of a better word, of the actual document. So that's why, but the higher priority is the actual priorities and what you're thinking they are. So this is the last time that you're comfortable with these two. I didn't hear or receive anything else on the priorities themselves. I do want to get into the subsequent prioritization in a second, but I just wanted to make sure that you are comfortable with this. And if you are, then we'll, Joe will be sending out a heads up to directors this week and then start this process. And that will be great. Mid-November is the deadline for those, and then we start getting the process like the budget. Did I get the general? Okay, cool. So question is, are you comfortable with this first sheet?
First page?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Or that's, I am.
Yes.
Yes.
That was easy. The second one was, we did get into a conversation, Joe, correct me, if you have specific priorities within these. I know I've heard from different directors, leadership, but it's one that you were really into. We had a discussion. I didn't see any one that really, that you three either agreed or said this is it. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong on that characterization. But we just want to make sure that there wasn't one or two that really left out of the three. Did I capture that?
Thank you.
From the standpoint of the community priorities, I see the community safety and justice system improvement and the homelessness and housing insecurity as so intertwined that it's difficult to call out a priority. They really do need to be advanced systemically.
And if I can on that, I think that that leads perfectly into what you see in the health and all actions. You'll see that's really fine. In the last meeting we had, the social determinants of health are also so intertwined. In my email I shared, I know with Sarah, her team, Sarah Hart's team and her team, again, it's so hard, everything is somehow related, transportation, housing, everything is part of that. I think it's going to be more iterative with it and how we characterize that. Is that a specific goal, or is it, hey, all these different things are working together? That's just going to have to be refined. So I just want to make sure that you're, that it is complicated.
But I agree. I just want to make a point. I think it's really a philosophical shift that we're making in thinking about upstream intervention rather than downstream reaction. And that is fantastic. And I think that we had a perfect presentation to preview that when it comes to the LEED certification. And we were looking at how expensive it was to go through the hoops, but there is a clear payoff. So I think that we need to be thinking about things in that way as we think about these other more social and justice system infrastructure investments moving forward as well.
Comments?
Well, I really appreciate the term priority-based budgeting. I think that's nice. It captures what we're trying to do. And so our job to put that into practice. Whoever came up with that phrase should get an extra cup of coffee or something.
Well, Rick and I talked about that at all. It just was interesting, as I alluded to, we were trying to do this for the 21-23 budget. Jane Caesars, Andrew, and myself were really trying to move forward with this. So we're looking at different examples and I know the library, all these different ones, and they're very similar when I was in the budget office, very similar in the process of how do we, because we never really had that before. And that 21-23 was the first time I think called COVID hit. But it's wonderful to have a conversation I'm having with you about having that and really understanding that we need to have a goalpost and not just, hey, here's some money. So I again, more on the fiscal sustainability side, this is, it demonstrates that these are investments, these aren't costs, they are true investments by the economic.
Well, and probably 2 years ago, maybe a little more, I remember having a discussion with Lilia about, okay, we have these 2040 goals, and now we're developing a budget and how to make those two things mesh and G. And I can't remember what she had a specific small part of the budget where she could do that. And so we've made quite a bit of progress in a couple of years.
Give us 3 months. I'll take it to the next level. So
I don't know what you need.
I got what you did. If you have yours, then
I have a quick question.
yes.
There's a couple to be completed in parentheses on the last page.
So yes, that alludes to what I was just saying about health, because we included that into the last meeting, and it's both the cause and an effect, and just how do we capture that? Every single department could have a health, all of them are related. So how do we? Health is everything. I totally get that, but when it gets into everything, it's how do you? Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and so I think Sarah and myself, I'm just trying to work that out. Is that a goal thing, or is that a capture events and activities and inserting that into the budget thing? That just needs to be on.
So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and then the same thing with the responsible governance to be completed. Again, as I reach out to other departments, HR, IT, others, hey, what are you doing with this? This library will be expanded.
Okay, so is that to be completed under responsible governance tied to the health and all actions, or is it a separate?
It's, this was our first cut at it. I envision all of these being added to. It was just, this is what you saw in black, in blue is what Commissioner Ojo provided. I just want to highlight, as I did last meeting, to make sure that, one, I captured you, Commissioner Ojo, your comments, and you too. I think there was, you on your phone or something, so I don't know if I got that in, Joe, so I just want to make sure I highlight that, and be consistent with the information you provided before.
I like the way you're describing it as a library, that last page is really something that will go to all the department directors and managers as they're formulating their budget, and so they understand what we mean. We have these big broad categories, because that was one of the biggest challenges the last budget cycle, is interpretation from our lofty goals to what departments actually do. So this is a list of things that departments actually do that they better understand as they're formulating their budgets.
And we referred to it for a while as operationalizing the 2040 program, and so that still connects with me when I talk to department heads about how we take these concepts and put them in practice.
Yep.
And it stems from the presentation where we're looking at, we only have three climate change departmental goals. But we have a policy, we're doing all these other things, and when we go out to the public via the budget, we want to make sure that they know that it may not be a departmental goal specifically, but we are doing a ton of things. And to be clear, the equity and diversity portion, that was me and Joe. The homelessness, that was me and Julie Arena and Rebecca Taylor. This is very cursory conversations I've had just to share with you, the experts, the point staff. This is going to expand. So that's why to be completed and to be on those kind of things. But the important part is that the priorities are set, descriptors are there, and now we can start putting on.
Okay, so just so that I understand, could you give me like an example of what a hypothetical to be completed under responsible governance would be?
I could see the, Joe, correct me, the budget portal was one that we talked about last time, a year or two ago. That would be another, for my example. Adam, if there's things that you've done with IT, I know you've done data collection and getting out on the website. Those would be some of the, some of those examples that go to HR, that it's online and onboarding now, those kinds of things. I think are responsible governance examples, that those bullets would be included. Again, for the budget for us to share that this is what we're doing. It may not be a departmental goal, but it's
I'm
not.
still gonna keep track of it.
Exactly.
Still doing work that's not just, yeah. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and just demonstrate to the public that their tax law is probably.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Of course.
Other comments or questions? All right, are we ready to?
Yeah,
move on?
we're all good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
So that I'm gonna call for a 5-minute break, so we will come back at 10:06.
So.
Example, we're all back. We are all back and ready to move on. Next up, item 3.4, multi-factor authentication and impacts on insurance rates. And we have with us Adam Lortz, our Information Technology Director, and Rick Krager, our Financial Services Director. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Morning, Joe. So to level set, we last met on this topic in July after we had talked to our insurance provider about our options and learned that our cybersecurity insurance requirements would be increasing the next time we renew in 2023. So in response to that, I did some discovery with them to learn that we needed to come up with a multi-factor authentication solution for the county in order to comply with their requirements and bolster our insurance coverages for cybersecurity. I'm not going to belabor a lot of the talking points that brought us to this decision, because I went over that in great detail, and I've also provided you with a project proposal which captures a lot of information. There's some more detail in there, so if you do get a chance to review it, if you have any questions following this meeting, please let me know. I've also handed you this boils down the salient points that we'll talk about today, which is just about how we purchase the solution, what the project would look like to implement. So sort of headline and highlights, which is a new term I learned yesterday. The good news is there are solutions out there that we can easily purchase and implement before June 23 of next year. That's the good news. Laying out the project, it looks like we are not budgeted for any type of solution into this biennium. I know that was expected. So we'll need to identify funding through the rest of the biennium. But then laying out the costs for maintaining the solution, it's probably, or it's at least IT opinion, that we roll this into cost allocation so that it's funded throughout the county by the participation level. It's a basic way to explain it. And the total cost, one thing we've learned in talking with vendors that provide these solutions, we've also talked to a couple other agencies in Oregon, talked to the city of Bend and Lynn County who've implemented similar systems. There, aside from just licensing the software itself, you need to also consider the costs of making that software interface and work with other solutions that we already have. So making the authentication work with our financial system, for example. And each one of those little interfaces that you have to create, there's a licensing cost involved in that as well. One of their major costs for implementing MFA is now that we're moving to Office 365 and moving our Office suite into the cloud, there's an authentication layer to accessing that service now rather than just loading the programs on the desktop. So we have to license the interface between our data network and the Office suite in the cloud. So that's part of the cost of the system. These are all things that we learned by talking to vendors. It's not just as simple as buying off the shelf software. We've got to account for all the interfaces, all the licensing, backups, and service for the product, which is another line item on the handout I give you today. So to sum it up a little bit, the base product and licensing for MFA and some of the devices that we need to get to work with authentication. So to explain that a little bit, we might have what are called key fobs that give a code that people use to log in. We may need to purchase cameras to enable biometric login with face scanning. So there's a small portion of funds that I think may be allocated to that, less than $5,000. If you add that to the cost of licensing the base product for MFA, it's about $40,000 for the core components.
How much?
$40,000. So that's per year. $5,000 I mentioned would be a one-time or as needed. You know, of course, if you increase the amount of employees using the service, then you need to purchase more devices, but they're small costs by themselves. Another component is the licensing that I mentioned to enable authentication to Microsoft 365 or our Office suite. And the backups and interface between the data we'll now need to protect in the cloud that pertains to the MFA. That brings the total cost per year up to about $100,000 or $99,500. It's about what we expected. We thought going in that the range would be somewhere between 60 and 120. Early on, we thought we were going to get away with a bargain. That was not accounting for all the interfaces we have to do. I also have to mention that part of the process or part of the project will be identifying all of these in very deep detail. So every application, which the county hosts 267, I think right now. So identifying which ones of those that were required by insurance to create authentication to with multi-factor authentication. In the proposal, it's recommended that by IT that we pursue this, that we find funding and move to implement the solution before next June. IT can manage this project and take it on in 3 phases. First phase would be to go into more detail on the market analysis that we've done so far to identify other candidates, compare the features between the leading candidates, make sure that we account for all the business needs across the county, which there are going to be many and diverse different needs for how the system is implemented. We think we can complete that by the end of the year, assuming that we have a funding source in place. We're going to meet a couple more times with the city of Bend and Lynn County to understand how they went about selecting and implementing. The second phase would kick off about the beginning of the year, and that would be after we have the service in place and we look to plan to implement how each business unit in the county uses MFA. That needs to be planned, tested, and implemented department by department basis. We're also going to have to spend some time identifying exactly which authentication methods that we decide to use in order to accomplish what we're achieving. And there's a lot of options. Maybe people want to standardize on 2 or 3. So that would be during the second phase of the project. The last phase, which we think will take us right up to June. I think in total, this project will take about 9 months. If I consider other competing projects and other ways our resources are being taken up right now, we hope to finish up around the middle of June 23. And that last phase will be the actual implementation and turn up of the system and testing and make sure that all of the business units are working with MFA and there are no big problems. Let's see, so I just wanted to, part of your project proposal highlights how this project addresses our 2030 goals. In this case, it's the easy sell because while I don't want to sound like an insurance salesman, you guys got enough of that is why risk assessment and risk avoidance are worthy investments. Not as easy as just deciding how much energy we've saved, because of course you never know if there might be an incident. But so while this is a decent investment at $100,000 a year, I think it's overdue. It's something that we really should move to implement so that we can secure the insurance.
And if I might just add real quickly, so first of all, Chair Wise, you have said something in the previous agenda item in terms of investments into good governance. In my opinion, this is a perfect example of what we're talking about here. Is unfortunately that things are happening, and we've seen across the county, across the state, across the nation in terms of a lot of security breaches and what they do. So I think protecting and mitigating that risk is a good investment. The other thing I would say from a financial standpoint, there's no way to exactly quantify this, but if this isn't done, you will ultimately pay it probably in insurance premiums if you want to maintain, if you're able to get those insurance coverages at all. And I think that's a risk because our insurance agent was very clear. We were able to get a little less than what we got this last time. So right now, even with not as much coverage as we've had in the past, but there's likelihood if we were to stay where we're at, we may not be able to get coverage at all, because there were a lot of insurance providers said, oh, we won't touch that unless there is MFA in place. So again, from a financial standpoint, yes, there is an investment that has to be made, and yes, that will be a cost to the county, but I would argue that you're probably going to make that in another way if you don't implement it. And you're going to end up with a situation where we're much more protected as a county. So again, appreciate all the work that Adam is doing that. And this, I think this is a really investment.
Great, so basically what I'm hearing is if we don't do this, we won't get insurance, or if we do, it might not be adequate. And if we do have a successful cyber incident, it could cost us millions of dollars. It is, it's never fun to see additional costs piling up and to read that they are projected to get even bigger. But as you both said, having a investment in mitigating risk is good and good governance. I have a question about, you mentioned cost allocation. So that would be, like you said, spread it across each department based on usage. So basically, we could be throwing a wrench into their budgets a little bit, like, hey, here's some extra money that you didn't budget for.
Yeah, that's correct. So part of preparing our budget for 23-25, IT works with the finance department. We try to help departments understand what all of their IT costs are. So this will be a new cost that gets added to a total amount of their contribution to cost allocation with fund IT resources. So it will increase their IT costs.
And for the rest of this biennium.
We will cover, we will find that investment for any costs that happen, there's this money, and that would essentially come from large sum of salary savings that we've accumulated. You'll hear us in a future budget supplement talk about this. I can give you assurance, though, Commissioner, that we have the coverage for his investment this finding, but he's absolutely right. For 23-25, it would be built in the rate.
Okay, so that was more, my main concern was just for the rest of this biennium. Sure. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Do you have an idea of which departments would be impacted the most?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I should just spend a minute highlighting that risk, which I outlined in my project proposal. And that's, but this isn't going to be an easy change for our employees and our peers. You know, they're used to doing something, their work a certain way. This is going to get in the way of that in some cases. A good example of that is going to be the sheriff's department. They, you know, the way that they use their technology is very dynamic. They often have it plugged into their car. They need to be able to quickly interface the device. So working on a way to make that as simple as possible while still being compliant is going to be a challenge. And I can tell you from past experience that any change in that arena is going to be stressful and a challenge. I'm confident we can work with the sheriff and other leadership in the sheriff's office to make sure that we smooth that out as much as possible. And the sheriff's department won't be the only department challenged by this. Everybody, especially with health claims, we're going to have to come up with very flexible and dynamic solutions to implement this so that they impact them the least. But there's only so much we can do. There is going to be an impact.
Sure. I'll probably complain and I'll try to keep it under my breath.
Yeah. It's anyone that has to be on and off the system and where they're going to time out on a regular basis, that's going to have a lot of trouble. So interfacing in the community, if you're in your patrol car or with a patient in the office, it's going to be a nuisance. So, but that's where something like biometrics comes in rather than or FOD.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if reviewing the solutions, we're going to be able to come up with some different scenarios to help smooth that out.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I guess I would. I'm not thrilled with it, but this is reality, and I was a little surprised at the cost, but balance that out against insurance costs or not having adequate coverage, and I believe this is close to a no-brainer. This is reality. This is what the county has to do to deal with it. And some dollar figures were thrown out about what it could potentially cost the county if we were hacked, and it's not just the money. It doesn't make us look very good. And that's part of our. That's part of what we do is just like with the building certification, and this is we're looking to the future and trying to be ahead of the curve, and I think this is just the cost of doing business.
Yeah, I should also mention that the insurance requirement isn't the only place that we're receiving pressure in this area. So both the criminal justice policy and the health policy both dictate that we should have some kind of multi-factor authentication. Through the audits for the past several years, it's been a department decision, both the sheriff's office and the health department, to just sign a letter of non-compliance in that area. So we do have the solution in place that they'll be able to certify it here.
Good. And those are both federal requirements and for their certification, aren't they? Yeah.
Well, and to the right there, we were mainly talking about internal, what this, how this will affect us, but it also affects people we deal with, community members, and So I think that's another felt is, we're taking care of ourselves, but also the larger community. Absolutely. I mean, you hear stories about somebody's laptop got stolen from their car and 500,000 accounts, people are on there. We need to protect our community. Absolutely. Maybe that's a way of helping sell it to the sheriff's department.
The revised, it was just, you just changed formatting and grammar.
That's great.
We have a couple of comments. Number one, Adam did a great job on the proposal. I love the way you laid it out, so thank you. And number two, Rick, clarification for you, or for me. So we currently have cybersecurity coverage. But as part of its most recent annual review, the insurance company dropped us from 5 million worth of coverage to 3 million, right? So we have 3 million worth of coverage right now. And come June 1st of next year, if that's the renewal, or July 1st, we'll be able to, if we choose, go back up to 5. In the multi-factor authentication. And then, we're going to be, the cost benefit, it's going to cost 100,000 a year. Hopefully, there's a trade-off in terms of reducing or limiting any increases regarding future premiums.
Right. So first of all, Joe, yeah, you said it exactly right. Come July 1st next year. So I guess back up in comparison, what we were finding in terms of potential rates. If we would have had NFA, we could have got $5 million on July 1 for the same cost that we got $3 million. So that gives you at least a little bit of idea that there is a huge difference as it relates to that. And so yes, it will put us in that position to be able to go back to a higher limit, perhaps even higher if we wish. And that'll be a conversation we need to have. I think the other thing that Darren had said to me, we have the opportunity once, and as we start to go through the process, I guess it just depends on what stages we're at, but we can go back to CIS and say, this is what our plan is at this point. There might be an opportunity for us to get some form of reduction now, or perhaps increase our limits to a place that we would be more comfortable. I can't say that for sure, but Darren did say that that was an opportunity. It will be dependent on kind of where we're at in the process, but I will. So maybe some stages.
Yeah, I would anticipate what they would look for is for us to prioritize very specific systems, and make sure that MFA is in place for those systems. And if that's the case, then we can rearrange our project schedule to account for that.
So a consultation with CIS would also be part of this planning phase then in October or December, better understand that.
Absolutely.
And as long as we're throwing numbers around, if we don't do anything on July 1st, our coverage would go from 3 million to 50,000.
Well, and that's so that, thank you for that, Commissioner. And that's the other point is come July 1st, if this isn't in place, we have a risk of not getting covered at all, which is not what any of us want. That was a pretty strong statement that was made by our insurance providers that it was hard enough to try to get what we did this time, maybe without anything if we don't do something.
Okay. Any last comments or questions? Right, thank you so much.
Well, I do have a comment. I appreciate the tandem here, that it's not just IT saying what the plan is, but the finance component. So helpful. That's reassuring.
Well, we're housed right next to the other one, so we're partners connected all the time.
Just
We're
all
honest.
together this week.
I told them we need to learn Morse code. So
Awesome. Well,
thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, next up on the agenda, item 3.5, 2023-25 budget development, community organizations funding. Rick Krager.
Good morning, commissioners. So compliments to whoever did the agenda, putting it together, very nicely placed in all these items.
They were strategic, right?
Very, very strategic in this, as I listened to Sean speak to you all about the goals. It was refreshing to hear him say the word investments. I love that because I always like to think about the budget is how do we make smart investments going forward. And that's a good segue into what I'm hoping to be just a discussion here today. I'm really looking for some direction. You all have sort of a process that you used in the past, but I need to try to get my head around what does that need to look like as we go into this budget development process. So we're here to talk about dollars that have traditionally been allocated to organizations prior to the budget plan and then adopted within the budget. And then of course we can get going forward. As I understand it, and some of these are linked to specific resources, particularly lottery dollars. So we had a requirement around economic development. There's been organizations in which we can put those resources. I think for COG being one of those specifically that we have those resources in the past. So as I understand how the process has worked, it has been sort of built into the budget development where there has been an exercise where we take applications or some form of proposals from community organizations based on needs going into the next funding. And that has been a process that has been executed early on in the development and of course adopted and then we administer it into the next biennium. Wanting to get, I guess, discussion from you about that process and your experience with it. I will tell you just sort of my thoughts in general. Typically what I've seen in the past with the budget development is that, you know, a board or commission or legislature adopts sort of a pot, if you will, of resources that they want to be able to meet a particular objective. And then the process is put together during execution. So I was talking about development. There's the budget development process, planning for dollars to be used for, let's just say, community partners who are doing good things, and then a good process during the execution. Similar like what we do with ARPA, where we've gone out and been very clear. That's what I'm mostly accustomed to. This, as I understand it, has been a process more upfront. And so again, looking for some guidance around that, regardless of what we do. I think what is critical. It gets back to kind of Sean setting us up here this morning is what are our priorities? What is, I mean, these are resources that are precious to all of us. You all want to make smart investments. You all have lots of priorities. Let's be very clear on what those are so that we put the money into the investments that are most important to the county and to the community. So that's sort of my entree to you today, just hoping to get some discussion, some guidance, some thoughts on how you want to approach it. Because if we do it more in the development process, I need to get me going pretty quickly on this so that I can start working.
I would love to speak to this just from my historical perspective, having been through a handful of budgets at this point with the county. I have to say that it's been an iterative process and it's been evolving ever since I took office. The first year I felt like it was kind of totally behind the scenes and really we didn't have a whole lot of say other than during the budget hearings process, and then things could get very sparky and controversial. The dollars that were allocated were a real mixture. It was really cats and dogs because there were programs that were more contractual programs like our Veteran Services Offices function, and then money to invent the food share or to support the trapper, the APHIS trapper. So it's all over the place. And I think that one of the things that's helped me is to understand a little bit better what's kind of departmental level contracting and what's truly discretionary Board of Commissioners investment, if you will, in the community. The other thing that's been a bit challenging is that the whole dollar source issue, because the primary sources have been lottery dollars, general fund, ending fund balance, some piece of it after we make other investments in the organization. And then sometimes the old CDBG fund, or sometimes some other little fund that has a little remnant in it. And so it's been difficult to understand in advance as a commissioner, you know, what all those resources are. And that kind of budget magic happened behind the scenes. So I like your question about maybe whether we want to decide on a pot of money in the budget process and then have the application process be separate. Or do we still have the application process happen as part of the budget process and have that budget hearing and all that community involvement? I think that, you know, both of those are very different models, and pros and cons, and what we really want to do, how we can be more strategic about it. One of the things we did decide to do is that previously it was not a very transparent process, but any organization could apply. But you had to know, because if you didn't know, you know, it didn't happen. The people would find out after the fact, and there'd be.
Fine, there were some cases where it was more via invitation to request funding as opposed to.
We shifted to that.
And
Then we explicitly shifted to by invitation only. And so if someone came to us or to Mary, or now Rick, they had to check in with us and see if that was an okay thing, because they hadn't really been invited, so it was awkward. So yeah, I welcome any kind of process that will make it a little smoother and a little bit more strategic.
Well, one excellent points, and one thing I want to say that you brought up, I think it's really important around what I would consider program services versus discretionary spending.
Yeah.
Because there are embedded services, and I think you used the veterans as an example. That needs to be distinguished, because from the standpoint that there are services that we do decide to contract, right? That we want to make sure that are built in the budget, and those are pre-decisions that will then follow the procurement process to actually dedicate to that particular area. But then, to the other point, there are, when I look through the history, so 2019-21, there was about $2 million of total budgeted money. That includes these program services as well. And that was 1.5 for this one. But there was in that what I would consider kind of more discretionary piece that you mentioned, roughly about 460,000 one line and 310 in another. So I think that, so I do think that there is a distinction. We should clearly distinguish to that. I think, you know, transparency obviously is always such an important piece, and that's what we really tried to accomplish during the ARPA process. The other thing I would offer is this is the key to our grant manager that I have successfully now hired, that starts October 1st. I'm very happy about that, but to have that individual to deal with not only like the ARPA, but also things like this, to where we could have more transparent process during the execution piece.
I like that a lot.
And as I mentioned to Joe, I also think there's opportunities as we do these, how we can also consolidate, so we're not doing individual, maybe we can roll this all into one. So, sorry, I just wanted to respond to something.
All good information. Other comments?
Yeah, I appreciate this discussion as far as the commissioners' discretionary funds. I've been uncomfortable with how it's how we've dealt with that. It's hard to set priorities if the requests are coming in one at a time, and oh, that sounds like a good one, but how does that fit in the scheme of things? What I've seen, we need a better process and be able to compare this request with this one and say, well, this one fits our priorities, this one not as much. And I think it's a great idea to separate out the program dollars from the discretionary. That once again, I would call that a no-brainer. I mean, just to help clean things up and figure out where the real decisions lie. So I'm all in favor of a better process. You mentioned earlier, one option would be to allocate a pot of money and then at a later date, do some specific allocations to agencies and at this point, to me, that's appealing. The budget process is complex enough without getting into that level of detail and trying to anticipate a year or two ahead of time what the needs and priorities are. So I'd like to hear more about that, but that's appealing to me at this point.
I wanted to, based on what you're saying, Pat, understand a little bit better the scope of this conversation, because we have these discretionary funds that we budget in the context of a biennial budget, but embedded in that budget has typically been some discretionary money in the Board of Commissioners budget. And that has traditionally been a more in the moment being able to react to proposals or requests that come to us. I would rather not lose that ability. I agree that we still haven't gotten to a perfect process for it, and that maybe we should be putting out a request for funding 2 or 3 times a year so that we can make those in a more systematic and strategic way. But I would not want to lose that within the budget cycle flexibility for small dollar contributions.
Just to kind of, and again, this is hypothetical, of course, all your direction, but I think at least what I've seen, you can have both to where you're saying, okay, hypothetically, well, let's have a community investment fund of dollars that are called the discretionary pool of resources that we build into our budget, we adopt into our budget. But then we surround it with a very transparent process that takes, I'm just throwing the stuff out, 90% of it is for application processes that occur every January, whatever we decide it to be. But then 10% of it is for small discretionary grants that maybe are under this criteria that this particular board decides on based on needs that may come, because you can't anticipate everything. So again, that's a model. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's sort of traditionally how I have seen these type of things set up. And that way you can have a very, very good process that your community partners also know, hey, we have an opportunity. Here's the priorities that the commissioners are setting. I know the timetable. We'll come to the table and bring that. And like I said, maybe we marry that with ARPA dollars and create a larger process. I mean, again, there's different ways that we can get efficiency around it. But really what this discussion comes down to, I think the traditional approach has been perhaps similar to this, but it done well in advance and building something. And some of those things, like you said, I think the distinguishing is program services versus discretionary.
Yeah.
And I think some of these things are areas that you do need to make decisions upfront. You're going to continue to have veteran services, what economic development, some of those dollars are very specific. So that would be a conversation of breaking that budget and also giving you the better understanding of these resources and how they all come.
And also a lot of these smaller ones are ones that come in, will you contribute $500 to our annual event? Will you contribute $300 or $1,000? And so we do get a handful of those throughout each year. And I would agree that it would be nice for the board to still have money to make those discretionary decisions on a smaller scale. But I really like the idea of the board deciding that we're going to set aside 500,000 or $1 million or whatever dollar that we decide that we can actually incorporate into the budget and then go through a process similar to what Rick was describing. And from my standpoint, one of the challenges I have is managing people's expectations, because I do get a lot of calls. Hey, Joe, looking for this. I'm working on one with the library right now. Let's get a lot of calls and, can you help fund this? Can you do this? Can you do that? And right now I really tell them how we're going to go about incorporating their request or telling them, hey, next February you'll have an opportunity, but no, these are the board's priorities. If it doesn't fall in these areas, it may not, likely not get funded or may not even accept applications unless it meets that. So for me, I really need a tool to help manage other organizations' expectations of county funding aspects of their program and their services.
I think, getting all positives, that one con, I guess I would put out, and of course, so you have all the facts that, because of the way the process has worked, you potentially have organizations that sort of have expectation. And so part of that is your organization, well, this is traditionally kind of locked in, for the next year, and this is talking about maybe changing that. And again, we still need to have a discussion about what is program services versus what is discretionary, but so I want to make sure we think about that, because from a community partner standpoint, it's great to have that certainty, right? You've got to plan your budget as well, and now it's perhaps a little more challenging. So
A really good example of that is the Historical Society, and that one always comes to mind. And I unfortunately made a big splash probably 2 budgets ago when I suggested we begin reducing that contribution. And so, of course, at the very tail end of the budget, that created lots of hate and discontent surrounding that particular topic. And so, going in up front, knowing, what the board's expectations are and who has to apply, who doesn't, that's important.
Absolutely. So I was thinking that I was understanding this. Now I've got a little bit confused. I'm going around. So we are talking about discretional funding for outside organizations, which is different from the BOC's discretionary funds.
Yes.
Are we talking about incorporating the use of our discretionary funds into the budget cycle? Or this is just looking at, who are we gonna give money to from outside organizations?
yeah, I mean, I think, again, traditionally, looking at the dollars, you've given anywhere between $1.5 to $2 million of money. That's some discretionary, some that are very focused. You've given that off and made determinations up front. Some of that I would look at when I look at the allocations is it's been very, different organizations, different times. Some of it's been very set, and we'll need to kind of take that apart. I think what the most efficient method is to probably identify whatever pool we call that as discretionary, plus even the little pool that you use as a board of commissioners, bring it all together and then set up some parameters around, okay, we want, again, 10%, let's say, set aside for these small grants that you all need to do on occasion. Maybe we'll call it small grant program or something like that, versus maybe the larger pool that you put out, let's say, every August. Right after the fiscal year starts, we have a process. Here's the criteria. You establish that criteria, similar to you establishing the criteria for ARPA, do a committee, whatever you want to do. We would help you. This is where my grant manager comes in to help you in building and administering that process. Does that make sense?
And that way the Benton County Historical Society would compete with everyone else when it comes to funding under that with kind of an approach. And I like that. That's kind of what we were trying to move to, but we didn't get all the way there. Something like the I can't quite remember the acronym that what it stands for APHIS, the USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, and the trapping and the lethal kill of predators. That one is really challenging. And I think do we need to consider it every 2 years and what our philosophy is? Maybe. That's the one I think is going to give me the most heartburn.
So just to give you some examples, just give me 21, 23, and you've given money last time doing food share. You've given dollars to USDA, PHS, I'm not sure.
APHIS.
Like Meals on Wheels, another one, $10,000. Mary's River Watershed Council. And then, of course, the large ones Joe had alluded to, $498,000 to the Historical Foundation. That's your largest. We've also had economic development money that's come to the city of Corvallis.
It's interesting to me what's in there and what's not in there. The $10,000 to Mary's River Watershed Councils, in essence, gives the ability for for Public Works to collaborate with the Watershed Council on restoration projects. We don't count in there the $10,000 we give annual per biennium to Benton Soil and Water Conservation District for weed control collaboration. So there's total
Could be things that aren't
inconsistency.
in there.
There's total inconsistency about what falls in this bucket versus in the departmental buckets. And that's something that I would also like to be more
Yeah, and I-
candid about.
That will require me to do a little bit more advanced analysis. My focus has been on sort of the dollars you all have sort of controlled in this upfront process, but you're right, there were probably other.
And some of those, I think, just came in under past boards
Mhm,
and
mhm.
were therefore kind of built into department level stuff and others, so and that's something that happens over time and I think the board loses control over or loses sight of. So it's figuring out what's program services and what's, that discretionary investment is not
We can
trivial.
do some further digging and analysis. Obviously, this came up through some requests like Joe had said. But to your point, we could also look at this further across the departments and discover it, do we want to be more transparent on all of these resources that may be more discretion to manage?
That brings up a little bit of a question that came up in a budget cycle, maybe 2 biennia ago, about departmental level contributions to sponsorships for events, plus the board contributing to sponsorship for events. And
Is there duplication?
is there duplication? And is that okay? When is that okay? When is it not? And so that was the health, and the health department does have their own agenda that way. So, I'm sure, I know some of the other departments do too.
So one thing that I can get on board with is definitely the separation of the program services and the discretional funding. As Pat said, referred to as a no-brainer. I mean, it makes sense to set aside a pot of money, but at the same time, and to have a process, at the same time, I want to make sure that we're building in flexibility and some discretion for the, commissioners.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that, to me, you have, as I said, how do we be efficient with all the money? I think you can make a model that has both.
Okay.
And I think you have to, because things change, you've got to have some kind of flexibility. And you also, as part of the process, you could always say, I don't want to allocate it all, I want to set some back. I mean, that's a choice that you have as well.
And it is, it's good to keep in mind that our, what are our responsibilities? Our first responsibility is to our own organization to serve, our community members. But we can also serve community members by allocating money to other places too. So it's just a balance that we think about. And I do, I remember us talking about the museum being whittled down or weaned. And I supported that at the time. I still support that general concept, but with COVID in mind and their new building and stuff, just hope that we can still keep them on our radar.
Well, and
Well,
also,
and, frankly, what I'm set on is trying to establish a consistent approach to how we budget. And that's really what I look for. I'm not trying to hamstring or constrain the board, but we do need, I think, a defined process that can have flexibility built into it. And ultimately, the commissioners are going to be the deciding body on, who gets awarded what monies. Rick and I are suggesting that we just agree on a framework and a process that we can implement. And we want to have this conversation early on, so we don't get to February next year and say, oh, by the way, we should start working on this. We'd rather not go into it, have the board, if the board wants us to budget a certain amount. And if so, what is that amount in what process do you want to incorporate?
And like you
Into the
said,
budget process or subsequent to budgeting.
sure. And you need to be able to tell people to call you and ask, what do I do? It'd be good to have an answer for them. Okay, so as far as next steps, or I'm sorry, Pat, did you want to say anything else first? Okay, as far as next steps.
So what I think I'm hearing is definitely being able to look at this as what I call an execution process, identification of resources and budget development. And then also maybe broaden that a little bit, also being able to distinguish between program services versus discretionary. So that's work I will need to do to make sure that I have it all kind of lined up. But if that is the case, then what we would have is a dedicated resource that then when my grant manager is starting, one of the things we would do is work to build a process. And I think that we want to execute that process probably in August, that right after the biennium starts, because you're going to have organizations that are thinking, all right, I have this opportunity, but you don't want to wait too long. And so how do we, so that's what we will need to do for you and working with your guidance and then how to build that pot of resources. So that's sort of the general direction I'm hearing that I would go. And so this would, I could come back again and give you sort of a framework to all of that, if that's helpful.
Sure. And if the question is, how much do commissioners want to set aside for that? I would definitely need more, in writing, here's what we've been doing,
Yeah, and I have the history. I could, of course, share that with you today. I want to, like Joe said, let's get to the framework piece, but I can absolutely get into the details and nuts and bolts of the money. I have some ideas about some other resources that maybe we should be tapping into. And then the last thing I will say, remind you all, is that you have 2 more processes in ARPA. So when we talk about opportunities for organizations, and we were just talking about the museum, I think they would potentially qualify under that. And so we will have another one of those opportunities. So you have more opportunities in your toolkit to provide to them as well.
Agreed. And I want to ask just one last follow-up question, and that is about the next round of ARPA funding. I wouldn't want to delay that until next August. There's quite a bit of community need and I've been getting a lot of inquiries.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have too. And so
So my intent is to start that process probably late winter, first of spring. And the reason, Commissioner, is because of our startup time. I'm trying to do this to where it lines up with fiscal years. Because most of them, all awardees now are on a fiscal year basis. So want to kind of say, okay, that money runs out and then you have the opportunity to reapply and you can evaluate how well they did in the other process. So my intent, what I've been telling everybody, is looking for a process and to start up in late winter, early spring, so that we can be ready to execute agreements on July 1 of 2020.
thank you.
3. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You bet.
all right. Any other comments or questions?
Well, I appreciate the discussion. I think we would all be well served to have a better defined process, so that when the library calls Joe, give them some idea of how they fit in, if they fit into the process.
I usually call Rick and I say, Rick, are you in a good mood or a bad mood? And I report that back to the person that's asking for my.
And Joe, I'm always.
Well, now we have the advantage, we'll be in the building.
Yes.
You can just walk by and see how he looks.
I'm very happy to hear about the grant manager.
Yes. It's taken 6 months, but we're there.
Do they have a name?
Yes, Shalisa Steed will start on October 1st. She is from Clatsop County. She and her husband are relocating to the Corvallis area. So perfect opportunity. Someone's had 5 years of experience in working in county government and also working with health grants. So has that, and also has some public accounting background, which really helps in terms of the financial. So yeah, very excited about Shalisa starting on October. Clatsop.
She will be housed in finance.
Yep.
In your
Yep.
department.
Should be sitting right next to me.
Great.
All right, and with that, we can move on to item 3.6, Secure Rural Schools Act Funds Reauthorization.
Thank you so much. So I've provided you a briefing sheet in your packet, so I won't read all of that to you. I wasn't sure who has the background on Secure Rural Schools Act, so I'll try to summarize that and be as efficient for your time. So I think most of you know that there has been inquiry and opportunity for us as a county, as all counties, to be able to change the election in what is called our Secure Rural Schools Act funds. These are dollars essentially from a historical standpoint that come from the sale of timber, harvesting that has occurred on some federal lands across counties, across Oregon, both that are owned and operated by the U.S. Forest Services as well as BLM. So there are really essentially two pots of resources that we have received. In the 90s, we saw obviously that change a lot. Before this act got passed in 2000, it was based on actual receipts coming in, and we saw a great reduction in those in the 90s. And to create stability for counties and organizations, they created the Secure Rural Schools Act in 2000, and it basically established appropriation, if you will, that got renewed periodically by the federal government to ensure that we continue to get a stable level of resources. And so there's a formula way in which we have that, but unlike where you would have the volatility. Now, counties have the opportunity to stay with actuals versus getting more of the smoother appropriation. Most every county went with the smoother approach. I think there's only 69 counties across the nation, what I heard, that is still in the actual seats. So back in 2000, when this act was passed, we elected that. And then fast forward, there were some changes to the act, but basically what it came down to is there's three titles, three sections of the act: Title I, Title II, and Title III. Title I dollars are basically monies that come to counties, and depending on the pot, it could go to either support schools and roads. The money that comes from U.S. Forest Services is split 75% road, 25% schools. The money that comes from BLM under Title I, that is money for general operations. So that money just goes into our general fund. So two pots that are coming. We as a county have chosen allocation to say, all right, we wanted 85% of that to go. And then we had an option of what is called Title II and Title III to put the rest. Title II, basically money that the federal government keeps. And then that money becomes available for projects that occur on federal land that is approved by advisory board. And there's different advisory boards all over the place, but for our particular resources, it needs to be in the SIUSLA advisory group, and for the Forest Service, I believe it's the Western Oregon.
Yeah, for BLM, it's the Western Oregon
Yes,
office.
thank you.
Salem.
Yes. So basically, that's money that goes into a pool. It's money that will stay in Benton County and be available for projects. In your packet, I provided you a history because I was interested to see how much we had actually accessed that. So there's different organizations. It doesn't have to be us. It could be anything. I did notice that the last time we as a county accessed the money was through law enforcement back in 2016. So part of what I wonder is there opportunity out there that maybe we're missing that we should be looking at, and maybe we just don't know about. And so that's something to put out there for you. But again, since 2013, our allocation has been 85% Title I and 15% for Title II. So those monies have gone into a pot. Title III, we haven't accessed, and the difference there is that that money can come directly to the county to be done for projects that have a different type of use. Now, there is some process around that, and there's a lot of disclosure that you have to go through. And so again, but that is an option that we in 2013 chose not to participate in. We set our elections 85-15, and it's been that way ever since. Under the new law for this, the new appropriations, counties now have a chance to reconsider. And that's essentially where we're at here today, is coming to say, all right, do we want to reevaluate that? Do we want to keep it the way it is? And we have different options that we can go to. We can certainly continue to get up to 85% in Title I. We have the option to go down to 80% if you wish. I don't know that I would advise that, but you could if you wanted to give more money, let's say, to the other two titles. And you could go, let's say, 20% up to 20% Title II. Or you can consider dabbing into Title III and making having that money come to the county, and then we would have to administer a process to allocate it for those specific uses.
the Title III uses are really focused on community wildfire protection, emergency services, search and rescue, that bundle, that suite of activities.
Emergency services for.
Yeah.
There's, in your pack that I provided sort of a list, you can pull those up, but yes.
And how process heavy is it? What would we involve?
Well, basically, we have to be public notice in terms of any kind of decisions that, any process that we administer. We have to make sure that we're working with the regional advisor, the RAC, yeah, to be able to notify them that these are the projects that we're considering. I haven't looked at the complete details, but most of it is like a posting period of time. So I don't think it's as like CDBG, for example. I don't think it's that advanced, but I think, you know, there's a set of process. Now, the one thing under this new election, most you could consider under Title III is 7%. So just to give you an idea of how much money we're talking about, that's about $60,000 per year.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is because it seems to me that we're always looking for ways to fund our community wildfire protection plan implementation. And is it worth, can we do that with this money? And is it worth the process burden to be able to set aside that $60,000 so that community wildfire protection has a kind of a predictable budget? Because right now it has maybe $15,000 in its key.
Right. So I mean, I think from a kind of back to process, this would be yet another process that we would need to administer. Good thing we got a grant manager coming in that would be able to help us. I think that, under the uses, so it talks about carrying out activities under the Fire Life Savings Program, reimburse the participating county for search and rescue and other emergency services, cover training costs, and equipment for emergency services. So those are pretty broad categories. Develop and carry out community wildfire protection plans. So those are pretty broad purposes. So I see a lot of opportunities there to focus. So to answer your question, I do believe those are the types of things that could be covered. But 60,000. So if we win 60,000, that would be money. Depending on what you did with the rest, I would probably advise to keep stability in our current general fund and road funds to keep your 85%. That is continued. You don't have to do that, but if let's say you did that, that means 8% would go to Title II. So you would be cutting resources available for projects that are happening on federal lands.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the trade-offs.
That was my question. We're just rearranging.
Yeah, it really is just rearranging. And one other option you could say, or if you wanted to, you could say, well, 80% Title I. That would mean 13% would continue to go to Title II and 7% Title III. So you're not taking as much of a haircut on your Title II. So those are options, but overall it will be impact on general.
So for example, this is option 3, decrease the current percentage of either Title I or II or both. Apply for up to 7% for Title III. So we have to apply. Does that mean that there's the possibility that they're going to say no?
No, we get to elect. So you have a choice. So we have a form that's due on September 30th, and that's part of. If you choose to make a change next week, I'm going to need to come back to you with a resolution so that we have that for documentation. If you choose to keep it the same, I need to check advance, but I don't think I need to do another resolution because that would just still need to check that.
Okay, so just
it's probably.
So just to be clear, the money that goes for the projects, we don't have to apply for the projects.
It would be a process that we would administer in the county, similar to what we were just talking about, to where it would be very focused on those areas.
Okay, so what are we applying for? Or no, we're going to
apply the funds to.
Got it. Okay, wrong version of the word. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
One last thing, just to mention really quickly, I'm sorry, Nancy, was that the overall dollars that come to us, part of the legislation is that they actually are reversing back to 2017 levels. So we are expecting more money coming from BLM and US Forest Services. So that I don't know how much yet. I don't usually know until they give it to us, but I'm expecting that you will have some more resources. Sorry.
Any other comments or questions?
Is my impression correct? this program's been in place for 20 years, but the dollars have been declining.
They're up and down. They declined and they came back up. Again, it's all, remember, it's all based on appropriation. It's not, I mean, there is a formulaic way, but I can provide you some of the detail, but what we have seen is more of an uptick over the last several years, and I would expect that to continue because you've had the increase, you're gonna go back to 2017. So it's been on, but not as much as it would have been if we're taking actions.
Yeah.
It's part of the act was getting a smoothness of revenue as opposed to volatility and see actual receipts.
Personally, I like the idea of allocating some funds to Title III, as I already said, because of the fact that it would provide potentially a source of income for the community welfare protection plan and implementation. And I don't see that need going away. If anything, it will only increase over time. And I guess I'm inclined to take it from the Title II component. Despite the fact that I've been in a recipient of Title II money through both the Forest Service and the BLM when I was working at a nonprofit organization, the Watershed Council. Those funds are valuable to them, but I don't think we contribute very much. So I think that if we shrink our contribution, it will be a fairly minor hit to the Resource Advisory Council budgets.
Especially if you're seeing an increase back to 2017 levels.
Yeah.
So you'll have an impact, but maybe it won't be as much.
So question about the roads, is the Title I money restricted to only certain roads?
No, it's just to the road fund.
To our road fund.
Yeah, and this is specific to the US Forest receipts,
Yeah.
and state statutes actually govern, I guess, for states as it relates. It says that we must put 25% in the school fund and 75%.
From Forest Service, but not from BLM.
Correct.
BLM 7%.
Yeah, so there's there's two receipts, the one for US Forest.
Right. It just seems like, we're limited on how we can fund our roads and our, it's something we're always gonna need to do, and we have a lot of projects out there that can be done.
That's why I'm suggesting not touching that one.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So just following up on Zan's comment, I'd like a little more information on where Title II dollars go. And I think that starting to put some resources in Title III, I think makes sense, but I'd like to know what we're impacting if we do that shift.
What I can do for you is, so two things. One, like I did with the Title III dollars in your document, I can give you sort of the scope. Again, the requirement has to be on federal lands, and there are some specific requirements. The other thing, in your current packet, you can see every project that has ever been funded with Title II since the inception. So in that attachment, if you want to really drill down and see the exact projects, as I mentioned, the Sheriff's Office actually took advantage of that back in 2016.
Public Works has too.
Yeah. So, but I'm happy, Commissioner, to provide you a little bit more context if that's not getting enough.
That would be, I would appreciate that too.
Sure, I will follow up with all of you and just provide you the summary of how that Title II is used, and then I can just pull that stuff out a little bit more clearly.
And I can also say that the Resource Advisory Councils that govern, that make those decisions, the CITES law and the Forest Service is right here, and it's a very, very local process, and it all has to be connected to the CITES law National Forest. The BLM process is a little bit more remote. It's in Salem. It's a much larger region. There are times when we get monies from that process, and times when we get very small share of the monies through that process. So it's not predictable how much will come to the county. It's very much unpredictable money.
Sure, I have two questions. So that's kind of touched on it. And this is money that we get every year or every so often?
The money?
Yes.
Yeah, it usually comes every April. It's usually a one-time payment that we get in April. Sometimes that's subject to appropriations, but yes, Yeah, usually every April, and I have a history of that. I can also provide that to you. Just want to
Okay, yeah,
see.
like the most recent history.
You bet. No, I have it all the way back to inception, so I'll just go ahead and provide that to you with the additional other information.
Okay, and then my other question is, you said that there was a change in the law, and that's why we're looking at this now.
Yeah, so what happened when there's this, the Secure Rural Schools Act is it has to be reauthorized each and every
5 years.
yeah, something like that. And so this is part of the most recent reauthorization. Actually, I think it was part of the infrastructure bill that they had built this into. And then as part of the process, they just said, we're gonna let counties re-choose what they want to do.
It wasn't clear in the packet. I was like, why are we doing this now? So, thank you.
I think Senator Wyden has been a champion of
Yeah.
this effort through the decades.
Normally, commissioner wise, it's just a reauthorization of funding. There isn't even a choice like what we have here. The only reason I'm here in front of you today is because of the choice that you now have. You probably won't get this again for maybe another 10 years.
Sure, okay, so it's coming down from above onto us. You have the choice. Now's the time to make it, not just like, oh, well, maybe I think there's something good we can do. Or, yeah.
So a window of opportunity to change our investment strategy, is the way I look at it.
We'll see.
Very good. Open enrollments for questions. All right, do you have everything you need from us, or?
I think so. So as I understand, commissioner wise, kind of a leaning towards the idea of the 85, 8, 7% split, but provide you additional information on the title to how it can be used. I'll also break out the projects for you and also give you revenues. I'll provide that to you no later than tomorrow morning. But my timing wise is to try to get back to you next Tuesday so that we can get this and get a form submitted so we don't lose the opportunity. So if something changes, you can certainly let me know, but that's the direction we go.
Very good,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Great to spend the morning with you.
Thank you.
All right, a lot of activity, yes. So next up on our agenda is item 3.6.5, which is Historic Courthouse Advisory Committee expectations. Lynn McKee, our Natural Areas Parks and Events Director, and Chris Westfall, HCAC Chair. Welcome.
Chair, Commissioners, thank you for our time this morning. We're coming today because we have some questions, but first I want to give you just a quick overview of what we've been doing. The Historic Courthouse Advisory Committee has been tasked to provide some insights and recommendations to this body regarding the potential repurpose of the historic structure once the state court relocates out of that. Timelines are uncertain there, but we have some thoughts there about where it's going to go. So we've been meeting regularly now for
Monthly since March.
and we have a very energetic and engaged group of individuals who are participating as citizens and voicing interest in this, that, and the other direction of things. But what we've identified is we probably could use some guidance and clarification, partly around timelines. We have understood the timeline and that kind of shifted underneath our feet there suddenly, and so we pivoted to trying to adjust to that. We'd like to get clarification on that if you're available for that, as well as helping us scope the full extent of what our recommendation could be to you to best serve you. So with that in mind, what I'd like to suggest is we have been looking at all kinds of options. What we've done is we've gone through a winnowing process, looking at large buckets of topics from different kinds of use, whether that be a civic use, specifically government use, repurpose use, potentially commercial uses of all kinds of sorts. But we really don't know how detailed you want us to get down into. Are you looking for maintaining these big bucket approaches? In other words, are you looking so we could use a civic and maybe give us some types of that? We want us to get down into the minutiae and make a recommendation to a specific repurposing use, such as commercial, restaurant, down further than that. And so if you have some thoughts about that, that can help us. And in the context of that, I think to help frame your answers there, we also need to know if you have some thoughts about whether different aspects of any particular use, any characteristics of the use are more important than another. So for instance, foot traffic, is it important that we're drawing in the largest diversity of people into this space? Or is it important simply that the space be utilized to a maximum? For example, having potentially a high foot traffic, but not diverse use. So in other words, is it important that this be viewed as a community space that everyone in the community is going to be engaging with? Or is it acceptable or appropriate to be considering a repurpose use that maybe focuses on one type of function where the people utilizing the space may not be representative of the entire demographic of the county? And similarly, if there are any off limits kind of uses that you want us to have awareness of as well as we go forward with that. And by that, I mean in the idea of potentially of private-public partnerships. If that's something that is acceptable, that has been a topic that we have looked at and have wondered, well, should we advance this type of thing? So I've just thrown several questions at you with very little feedback.
One question for you, in terms of, and I think this probably might be a less important discussion, but timeline. I can't remember what our original timeline was and what you're shifting to. So refresh our memory there.
Well, we had originally looked at coming back, say March or April. And then with the changes with JSEP, Nick Kurth had pushed it to November because there were certain decisions by December that you would need, and we panicked. And that, but then the decision was made, well, because the courthouse, it sounds like, won't be part of the JSEP, that maybe we should wait and bring a recommendation back in, say, June or, May or June after, so that we're not, because we're not involved in the bond measure, maybe we wait and let that ride through. So it's been vacillating around. So we thought today if we could get more of an actual, what your timeline, when would you like to see it? Now that you are really drilling down on that JSEP time schedule, and how do we fit in there, or just wait until after that's done?
I don't know what my preference would be. I think that I would prefer the March, April timeline, because that way we could have some community response and discussion and some sense of direction before we go to the bond measure in May, rather than waiting until June after the bond measure. And because it'll always remain a question mark. And it'll be maybe less of a question mark if there are a suite of recommendations that are out there being discussed. So that's my gut instinct on the timeline.
Clarifying question. Do you want like a suite of options in that time, or do you want us to basically make a decision?
Oh, I don't think we need to make a decision in that time frame. I think we just want to have that report or a preliminary report from the committee at that point.
So we can show people who are asking.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, because the committee, so the community knows that you're in those discussions and
Yes.
making plans.
and that we're not forgetting about it.
Right,
It's not,
right.
off the table altogether. It's still a part of the mix.
Okay.
And I have plenty of thoughts on the criteria
Okay.
section too, but I
Good.
want to let.
Sure. And I think, I will put in a plug for public participation, and, hopefully we'll have a chance to get lots of public participation in there. Maybe that's in between the time that final recommendations come out on us. I don't know.
Yeah.
But could be public participation. Very good. So one question I have is, would it be possible, so you asked some good questions about, are there some characteristics that are more important than others, higher priorities? I'm not sure I have a good answer for that at this time, but is it possible to get a suite of options and say, here's this option, however, it would mean, less diversity of the community, but higher use of, a maximum utilization, kind of just pros and cons. I mean, maybe not even pros and cons, just the ins and outs, what each one would mean. And I think another big question to this is the seismic retrofitting. We don't have at this point in time any money to do that. So that's gonna be a question mark, you know, if we were to get the seismic retrofitting, that would open up options. You know, right now, we're not gonna wanna put a daycare in there, you know, stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know what to do with that. That's just a question mark.
Yeah.
So sorry.
No, go ahead.
I appreciate your thoughts about the review, if you will, of, we're looking at this one, here's the pros and cons, maybe leading into some feasibility. That really lines up with the work that we're currently attempting to do ourselves right now. We're trying to compress that into a very tight timeline with the November, but with some additional time, I think we can expand that and get a much more robust sense of really a thoughtful analysis of those characteristics and get that mapped out very well.
Perfect, that sounds great.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the timeline. I think we have to be careful confusing the community voters. JSIP project has a lot of moving pieces and what's in it, and if we get too much discussion on the historic courthouse, I think that's be a disadvantage to the bond measure. I think it's important to be able to say, well, we're working on it. Here's some options. But I think for any kind of anything close to a conclusion, I would definitely wait till after the May vote. I mean, we really need to concentrate on the bond measure and keeping that message as clear and clean as possible. Because it's complex, and to have something that's not included in that vote, I think we have to be careful not to muddy the waters.
So what I had suggested was that there be a draft report by that March, April timeline, and then it could be finalized after the bond measure. Would that work?
I think so, and I would keep it at a fairly high level, maybe get it down to 3 or 4 possibilities, but that is still a work in progress. But this facility is not forgotten. It's just not part of JSIP discussion.
So would you prefer the public engagement portion then wait? Would you like for us to go through our discussion process, bring you our ideas in March, April, and then after the bond, we would then enter into the public engagement community outreach part?
Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Because we were going to have it as part of our process before we bring you the recommendation, but it sounds like we should break that out and do it afterwards.
Well, I mean, so I can see it from that point of view, as we don't, like you said, want to muddy the waters. However, I don't want the community to feel like we just baked these in and now we're just gonna tell you about it and say, here's your public input. People tend to feel like, well, I didn't really have my voice heard, you're just showing me the final product.
But that's why I'm suggesting that what the committee could do by March, April is have a draft of options, really lay out those pros and cons and what those community trade-offs would be, and then have the community input about that and help to weigh in on some of those trade-offs, and specific use versus a community center use that draws in a diversity of people. I see that as one of the bigger tensions, you know, or a government program versus a more kind of community facing open wide. So I think that those are the kinds of things that we really would want public engagement on, but having more specific proposals and knowing about kind of the feasibility of them by March, April would be great, because then we're talking about things that might be realistic rather than just, you know, hypothetical, which I think is very hard for the community to react to. I want to say that public-private partnership would be, to my mind, only an advantage. So I think that we need to leverage all kinds of resources, and I don't know what's possible in that realm, but I think definitely because of the funding constraints, that's something we should be exploring.
Okay.
With the input that you're giving me, I think one of the things that I can offer to do, if we could certainly come back to you between now and March with a timeline. So that we're agreeing that we're working in concert with your interests, giving you a timeline of when, of course, looking to this March timeline to give you a preliminary report or preliminary assessment of where we are, but then having at the same time giving you a sense of, well, when are we going to do the public input? To help inform that, if you're interested in that, do you have a sense of when you would like to have the final report from the committee?
Can we get back to you on that? Yeah.
We can check in, yeah.
Sure.
June, September, I think my only hesitation is that, of course, if we wanted to put any further fiscal resources toward developing any ideas, it would be nice to have some notion of that in the budget process. And I'm looking at Rick back there. I don't know whether the word budget, penetrates his.
He's trying to ignore you. It's like.
But that's my only caveat. I think that the final report is not a must-have at a particular time. Yeah.
And yeah, if you're putting together a timeline, the group maybe can discuss and see what's feasible for a final report. And then come back to us and talk about it.
Okay, we'll do that.
Other question, getting back to the public comment stuff. I should know this because I'm liaison. Is there opportunity for public comment at the meetings? Is it on the agenda? Public comment?
Has not been, but it will be.
Okay, because I think that would check the box there. That would be an opportunity for people to come in and talk if they want to.
Yeah, because it's certainly agendized and published, so they can certainly.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. I think the important thing in the next better part of 6, 9 months, maybe year is showing the community that we're working on. That no, we haven't forgot about it. And just your history of 6 months of meetings and discussions and trying to figure out what the universe is, and then start winnowing that down and the pros and cons of various options. And other than that darn budget, I think the final product date should be flexible. Most every project we do, there's, well, here was the original timeline, and then we have, we were scheduled for 2 public meetings. I think we need a 3rd one. I think the overarching goal should be being flexible and making sure the community is well informed on what's going on, and that if it takes a couple months longer than ideal for the original schedule, I think that we would be well served, rather than, oh, we had a deadline and sorry, you missed the boat. Because this, geez, the building's been around 130 years, a couple more months won't hurt.
Well, I very much appreciate it. I know that the rest of the committee will as well, knowing of the flexibility of the timeline. We really want to do a very thorough job. We want to be able to give you the best informed information that we can. And we were concerned we may be working with an artificial deadline there. So this is very welcome news. Thank you.
Perfect. And then I think you asked, is there anything that's off the table? obviously knocking it down, which we know we can't do. Or anything that changes the historic, integrity on the outside, right? So
Right.
we're
Yeah,
bound
we do
by.
have to, and we do have a member from SHPO, from the State Historic Preservation Office there, just making sure as a, as a consultant, just so that we don't go too far down the road that he says we're not going to support that. So, yeah, so I think we have a really good team of people from all the different perspectives.
Another question, how do you feel that I guess the general mood or direction is going? I mean, do you feel like you guys have good momentum so far? Or I know you come back to check on, direction, but.
It's an excellent question. And I'll give you my candid response there. I think the mood is enthusiasm tempered with confusion.
Okay.
To the extent that we can now alleviate some of that confusion, because really we thought we were working in one direction with a certain timeline that was really compressing us into.
Yeah, the November
Satisfies.
timeline.
We're trying to satisfy us in a way that we weren't really feeling comfortable
No.
with. So I think this information that we're getting today, and we're meeting again on Friday.
Yes, Fridays are,
And I will be at that. I think I missed the last one because I was camping or.
yeah, I missed the last one too as well. So, and it sounds like it was a lively debate of options that are on the table, but it's done really, I think it's really well. And Chris Westfall has been an amazing chair, so. Thank you.
So is that 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock at the courthouse.
We meet there
Every third Friday.
Friday at 10 o'clock on the second floor, room 213.
And there is a Zoom link or a GoToMeeting link or.
Yes, there will be. We're going to encourage people to be in person because we think that's just a better energy, but we should offer that option for the virtual for those. Like we have Erica Cedar from DLR who joins us and such, and they're able to join us.
Or like if Commissioner Malone wants to peek in on this.
Yes.
Click on for a little
Yep.
bit if he wants.
Absolutely. We'll make
And
sure
I'll send you a copy of the agenda because Chris and I are going to meet and finalize that. And that'll have the link, and the link's the same every month, so it doesn't change.
Very good. Other comments or questions?
No, it's great to hear the interim report. I guess we appreciate it.
Mhm.
So thank you for your insights. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We have a motion.
Oh, there's a motion? What's that? Is there?
Oh, I think it was. I don't think we really need one. I just put one in there because it requires. Yeah, right.
What is your preference, Linda? Would you like us to?
Oh, because my motion was just direct staff to lead the committee through the process to develop a recommendation for adaptive reuse based on the discussions.
Which is what we used to
do that.
Oh, darn, I was ready.
You're ready to make a motion?
You were on it. Good job.
Thank you again.
All right, thank you.
All right, let's see, we have about 20 more minutes of our meeting because we need to get off, eat lunch and go to another thing. So let's see, we are moving into 3.7 tobacco regulation. And we have with us our county council, Lance Crowley. Thank you for joining us. And Sarah Hartstein. Oh, and Sarah Hartstein, my apologies. Thank you for joining us today. And Andy C. Okay. Who would like to kick us off, Vance?
I can. So Mr. Wise came and asked a question of me Friday at 4:55. Regarding the request from 3 business owners we had last 2 weeks ago to allow their tobacco retail, like marijuana sales business to be located within 1,000 feet of another tobacco retail licensed retailer. Commissioner Wise's question was, do we have the authority to grant the exception to our code provision? And
It's a little bit convoluted, and I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. I did send out an email to all of you and to Sarah and Andy. I apologize. I forgot to include you on that email. Hopefully, Sarah forwarded on to you the email. Did? All right, great. So if you recall, we have an agreement with the city of Corvallis to administer and enforce tobacco retail licensing within the city limits. We have the same agreement with Philomath, Monroe, Adair, and I think that's it. As part of the process this winter, early spring, the city of Corvallis amended its tobacco retail licensing ordinance to, and I quote, put it on hiatus. So the city's tobacco retail license ordinance is dormant. It does not apply. In its place, Benton County's code provision regulating tobacco retail licensing applies within the city of Corvallis. Pretty straightforward. Within the county's ordinance are certain restrictions on where retailers can operate within 1,000. They cannot operate within 1,000 feet of the school. They cannot operate within 1,000 feet of another business. There is a provision in our code section that allows those retail licensing establishments that were in place and operating before the code became effective to continue operating if they're within that 1,000 feet. Basically, it's a grandfather clause. At the end of this section that describes the prohibitions, there's I think subsection 6 that says an exception, an exemption to these provisions as outlined in this section essentially will allow businesses to be located within the limited area. It is not clear whether the description of an exemption in our code applies only to those grandfathered establishments, or whether the exemption provides an opportunity for the board to consider applications that would be located within 1,000 feet. And I really, really wish I could give you a straight answer to this, that yes, you can, or no, you can't, but it's just not that clear. And obviously, I know Sarah, Andy, and Suzanne have input, and I will stop here in just one moment, ladies and Andy. The one thing I guess I want to underscore here is if the board is inclined to interpret your code provision, if it's our code provision, you have the authority to interpret it how you choose. If you choose to interpret it as allowing Benton County to consider exemptions to the citing criteria, I would encourage you to consult closely with the city of Corvallis, because really what these businesses are asking you to do is allow them to operate within the city of Corvallis in the place that Corvallis's code doesn't allow. So it's not just Benton County making a decision out in the unincorporated area. It would be Benton County making a decision within the city of Corvallis. And I think it would behoove all of us to be in concert with the city of Corvallis on that topic. So again, that's the lay of the land. I don't have a specific yes or no answer for you, so I will.
Sure, thank you. Maybe I should have prefaced a little bit. I'll just say this real quick and then we'll go hear from people online. So yes, this came about because we had a community member come and testify and send us some emails and whatnot. And then the president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of Corvallis reached out and asked for, next steps. Can we talk about this? So my intention was really, number one, trying to just get to the bottom of it. Can we even make an exemption? And then if we can, do we even want to? That's a completely different question. So, and I'll just speak to the, I didn't initially feel comfortable making this decision for the city of Corrales because it is within their, it's the city of Corrales, it's within their city. I have reached out to multiple city councilors and even the city attorney, and they've all just said, it's not our problem. To that extent, maybe in a more polite way, but from what I've heard is maybe if, Joe reached out to Mark Shepherd, it might get a different answer. I don't know. So I just wanted us to be able to talk about it today, and thank you Vance for clarifying all that stuff. And now we can get to some of our health department people, if you would like to speak to this.
Thank you, commissioners. I asked Sarah Hartstein and Andy Chenard to be with us today. These are our subject matter experts, and I'll just hand it over to Sarah.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I just want to do a sound check to make sure you can hear me. Thank you. I'm working remotely this week due to illness in my household, so otherwise I would have appreciated being in person. And thank you, Vance, for kind of the rundown on the code. So what you mentioned is correct in the sense that all of the jurisdictions within Benton County have parallel language built within the code, and that was done intentionally so that we could have standardized and uniform enforcement across the county, even before Benton County Public Health took on the enforcement of tobacco retail licensing just this last year. So that was done intentionally. In 2017 was when the 2016 and 2017 actually is when all of the different local codes were updated to include the 1,000-foot distance between new tobacco retailers and schools, and the 1,000-foot distance between current and new tobacco retail businesses. And that again was done to address issues of density, access, and advertisement to all populations, not just youth. And so, what we know is that the built environment in which individuals and families live, it really does matter when it comes to overall health outcomes. And so what we also know is that a greater density and higher number of tobacco retailers have been associated with higher rates of cigarettes smoked per day, lower rates of quitting, and higher rates of youth smoking. And this includes retail proximity to schools and the concentration of retailers in specific neighborhoods. So again, when we're talking about retail density, we're talking about access to tobacco products and nicotine and that exposure to the tobacco advertising. And in general, data shows that areas with higher tobacco retailer density are in areas with lower incomes and more people of color. And this is specifically the case for the city of Corvallis, which has 68% of the tobacco retailers in Benton County. And in 2017, when we presented to City Council, we shared maps with decision makers showing tobacco retailers overlaid with Oregon Health Plan or Medicaid members, income levels, and race and ethnicity. We updated those maps recently, and it shows us the same thing that it did in 2017, which is that tobacco retailers are located in areas with a higher concentration of Oregon Health Plan members, families with lower income, and people of color. So that's happening in our community, and it aligns with what we see throughout the state, throughout the nation. We also know that communities with higher numbers of tobacco retailers suffer most from the negative health effects associated with tobacco use, and the setbacks that were proposed and adopted are one strategy to reduce the density and number of tobacco retailers in Benton County in order to address health inequities, decrease tobacco use, and limit exposure to tobacco marketing. And what I love is Andy said it so great. Effectively, like more tobacco being sold and available in a greater density carries a negative impact on the health of the community overall. I also agree that, you know, we're kind of taking on the tobacco retail licensing on behalf of our other jurisdictions, and really would need to consult with all of those jurisdictions, not that this just the city of Corvallis, to determine what criteria would look like for an exemption. Because we have seen applicants in the past, we have applicants currently, and we're going to see them in the future that are going to say, well, I would also like an exemption. And currently we have no criteria to determine what an exemption might look like, other than the grandfathered businesses. That again was a compromise at that time to allow those businesses to remain operating when the code was updated. And I just want to check in with Andy and Suzanne to see if you have anything additional that you want to mention with folks today.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you said pretty much everything that I did have on my mind. And in addition, public health is concerned with preventing the burden of disease from tobacco use and nicotine addiction in people of all ages, not just over 21 or under 21. We really want to see that apply and our community become healthier across the board with less smoking and nicotine use.
Thank you. Any other comments from those online? All right, thank you. I'm happy to say, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on something Sarah said, and I didn't bring it up, but it's a very good point. There's nothing in the tobacco retail license code that describes how an exemption would either be sought or reviewed. So her point is a good one, that if there is an inclination by the board to interpret your code that allows greater exemption beyond grandfather, we would have to figure out how to process that kind of request.
I mean, I could see that as, yeah, if we wanted to do this kind of thing all the time moving forward, that would be a best practice. I mean, I'll just say, I don't want to be making exemptions all the time. But it seems like the criteria would be the commissioner's discretion until we put that in.
Yeah,
Unless
if the interpretation is you have the ability to grant an exemption, yeah, it's kind of wide open for your discretion. Candidly, that's.
I'm not saying that's
this is
best
a
practice, but
that's
best idea.
not a good practice,
Yeah.
because it can lead to some very inconsistent results.
Yes, I agree with that.
I don't think it was the intent when that language was drafted to craft an exemption process. I completely agree with Sarah that I would rather see, if we do want to have an exemption process, a clear set of criteria and standards and process.
And I guess for me, again, I don't want to be making these decisions all the time. I fully recognize that if we were to, by whatever method, create an exception for this individual, yeah, is that a slippery slope? Are we going to have people come to us all the time? You know, is it going to be just a can of worms? Having said that, I mean, this particular case, the facts, you know, it's a business that has been there. They had a license once before. So we're not adding any new tobacco. It's already tobacco that's being sold there, but the licenses are not transferable. The business owner did not know this. And so now they are having a hard time with their business. I think she said they might have to close. I don't know the details on that. You know, it's a 21 and over store, so you're not having kids come in.
Commissioner, if I could add one point, please. I did check with the city of Corvallis, who previously administered these licenses, just to check on the record of this particular location, other business names and ownership being licensed, and they did not find any. Now, I could do a deeper dive if the commissioners would like me to come back with more information on that.
I just wanted to clarify, Andy, I thought that there was a business that applied at that location, but was denied by the city of Corvallis because they were close to Safeway.
That's correct.
But no former license was issued.
Okay,
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you for that clarification. I was under the impression that they had a license and it just did not transfer in the sale. So thank you for clarifying. Any other thoughts? Pat, what do you think?
I'm confused.
Okay.
At the meeting last week, I mean, that seemed like a reasonable request. I do, I feel uncomfortable proceeding without some guidelines. The one-off kind of decisions, I don't think serve us well. But I don't know how long getting that exemption policy would take. But I would say we need that. I need that before I proceed.
Sure. And at this point, I don't think we need to do an exemption policy because I don't feel like I want to make exemptions, all the time moving forward. So, yeah. So what I'm hearing is that in this case, or in any case, and unfortunately for this business owner, that we are not going to be inclined to make an exemption.
Not as a matter of one-off practice.
Okay. Well, we had the conversation and there you have it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we can move on with the agenda. The county administrator had to leave, so we will move to commissioner updates. I just have one small update, which is that I am officially now the chair of the LOAC, the Local Officials Advisory Committee.
Congratulations.
Which advises the LCDC and the DLCD. So we'll see if that was a good idea or not. We've had one meeting that I've chaired so far yesterday, and I think it went well. So
Excellent. And are you finding that to be a useful forum to learn more about issues that are facing?
Yes, yes, I think we have a little bit of trying to tighten up and align our expectations of what we're trying to do, what our role is. We just made changes to the bylaws that I think are getting us in the right direction. There was a change in staff, so now they don't have a permanent staff person, so we're having a temporary staff person. So just like anything, we're trying to sort it all out.
Great.
Yeah. Would you like to go next, Pat?
Certainly. I think the only thing I had is well, thinking about the Adair clubhouse that's been nicely remodeled. I've just been passed it on. I can see the outside looks much better, and significant improvements on the inside, and also heard that Corks and Forks, there's not a lot of activity, and it may be a little late, but a couple of possibilities for some activity would be a legislative breakfast sometime this fall. And I saw Senator Kelser last Friday. I asked her if that might, if she would think that's a good idea and would fit with her schedule, and Representative Rayfield and some others, but that's an advance that as a possibility for getting ready for the upcoming legislative session. Another possibility is some kind of awards dinner ceremony that we haven't had in several years, and I think we're definitely overdue for staff recognition type events, and see if it would make sense to have it at Adair clubhouse. I know several years ago, we had a kind of recognition of people that are on our committees. And since there's no pay, that's could be part of your reward for giving the county your time. So, but kind of the theme is we've got this facility and it's been sitting fairly idle, and maybe we could do something about that.
Feels like it's been a very busy beginning of the school year. September always seems to pick up pace. But a lot of what I've been working on continues to be at that intersection of the criminal legal system and behavioral health. I've been participating in a monthly meeting hosted by Judge Donahue, focused on the aid and assist population and the recent federal judicial decision that interprets the maximum stay by folks from the counties at the state hospital. They are in that aid and assist program to restore people to competency to defend in their own, to aid in their own defense. So one of the things that is changing in this landscape is that there's a role for a formal assessment of the ability for people to aid in their own defense. We have used a couple of psychiatrists that are that on a contract basis, one more than the other, but without a formal program. And there is a proposal that we are now exploring to perhaps enter into a contractual agreement. And I'm not sure exactly whether that would be OJE or the county or whose contractual agreement for a rapid aid and assist program. Because one of the problems is that people languish in the jail too long before they get assessed. And then it delays the time before they can get to the state hospital. And the other time period when that a rapid assessment would be really useful is when they're at the state hospital, so that we have really good information from trusted psychiatrist assessors as to what they're going to need when they come back to the community. So we're going to get a presentation from an organization that does these rapid assessments that's already working in Clackamas, no, in Washington County, in Multnomah County, and in Lynn County, and Jackson County. And I'm really looking forward to that. And may hear more about that coming forward, depending on what all it's going to take in terms of reorganizing some of our processes to better handle the cases of folks with severe mental health issues that end up in our jail. Yeah. So that's it for me.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
Yes. And this will be incomplete, but I heard Senator Wyden on the radio this morning talking about, I'm not sure if this was proposed or actual federal dollars for those type of programs. Seems like that fits right in with our efforts, and I'd love to hear more about that.
One of the things that happened is that the state's application for an 1115 waiver under Medicare, Medicaid was just approved.
Yeah,
and
that was.
And so that will allow for much more flexible funding for those kinds of services to be billed under the Oregon Health Plan. And I know that Senator Wyden was very much in support of that. There has also been legislation introduced in Congress to fund CAHOOTS types of programs. I haven't seen any of it go anywhere. It's got a lot of support, but I don't think it's just.
Well, and having Senator Wyden behind it, I think is he has a lot of credibility on healthcare type issues. Currently is in a good position to advance that future funding.
As chair of the finance committee, it's really nice to have him there.
Yep.
All right, anything else?
Just good tour of the last Friday of Western University, and I've heard a lot about what's going on there, but I've never seen much of their facilities and programs. And, I'm glad I got up a little early and because it was optional. I want the record to know
Yes,
this was optional. All three of us made it.
we all get credit. Just give that little credit.
I think it was great. I really appreciated the tour. I'm sorry we delayed the start of our district meeting, but it was well worth it.
All right, with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 12:05 PM. Thank you, everyone.
So
It's not disconnected.
Ow.